What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Friday, April 13th, 2018. So all you Trishkadekaphobics out there, hide under your beds or in the closet or whatever you want, because it's Friday the 13th, which, unless you're a Knights Templar, I don't think you really need to worry about that a whole heck of a lot right now. Anyway, we've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. And, of course, the lovely Lady Claire will be joining us in hour number 3 with her unique perspective on the world. So let's get right on into it. A lot of mixed signals coming out of the White House, and it looks like they're pulling back from this idea of an imminent attack on Syria. And, of course, the war hawks are out there screaming and crying and rolling around on the floor and kicking and screaming and throwing their usual tantrums here. And Trump is now out there saying, well, I never said when an attack on Syria would take place. And goes on to say, we've done a great job of ridding the region of ISIS. Where's our thank you, America? So they're trying to find a dignified exit strategy, and it's really not all that dignified. They basically were forced to back down because of the utter absurdity of that claim that there was a gas attack in Duma that Assad did. It just didn't make any sense, and everybody around the world was picking up on the illogic of it all. Now, apparently, John Bolton and Secretary of Defense Mattis are going back and forth over what to do about Syria, and Bolton is out there saying bomb, 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 and Mattis is urging caution. Now, he's the Secretary of Defense, and that means he's in a position to more accurately evaluate what would be the consequences of a massive attack into Syria that runs the risk of a direct confrontation with Russia. And I think the concept of a Pyrrhic victory comes into play here. Because even if the United States were able to prevail against Russia in Syria, it would be at huge, huge cost. And it almost reminds me of the attack on Pearl Harbor, where Admiral Nagumo was criticized by the crews on his ships for calling off the strike after just 2 attacks. And he said, no, this war is going to go on for a long time. My duty now is to preserve this fleet and return it safely to Japan because we're going to need it. So it's kind of along that line. And Trump is now taking the position that they're looking very seriously and very closely at the whole situation, and we'll see what happens. And then he made this odd comment: it's too bad that the world puts us in a position like that. Now, of course, Trump's earlier tweets about our missiles are coming and they're fast and they're smart and everything. But Trump is crafting an exit strategy with this comment: it's too bad the world puts us in a position like that. It's not our fault. It's unrealistic expectations on the part of the world. And now the White House is coming on out. Actually, this is coming from Erdogan's chief advisor, is saying that Trump's Syria threats appear to have been primarily for domestic consumption in the U.S. Trump wanted to prove how tough he was on Syria and Russia to the American people, and he just didn't expect that Syria and Russia were going to take it all that seriously. I mean, didn't they understand he was just BSing the American people? Apparently not here. And so Trump is out there saying it's too bad the world expects us to respond in Syria. And actually, Donald, the world would rather you not respond in Syria to what is such an obvious piece of bovine excrement regarding that chemical weapon attack in Duma. A hot war between the U.S., Russia, and China is not going to do anybody any good at all. And I'm rather pleased to see that Mattis is acting as the voice of reason and caution in all of this. Interesting little story coming out of the Daily Sheeple saying, according to the White House, the rationale for the war with Syria is apparently top secret. And apparently they've issued a 7-page memo that makes the case for an attack, but the first 2 pages are heavily redacted. So whatever the rationale for war in Syria really is, it's not something that you're supposed to know about. You're just supposed to buy this story about Assad is gassing his own people again, and throw your money and your children into the war zone. All right, we're going to take a phone call here from Rick in Fort Lauderdale. Aloha, Rick. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Sir, you're the only one I know of that would be wise enough to look into this. In regards to the gassing, and I know you picked up on a lot of different things, have you seen anything about any burials?
No. I mean, the people who are on the ground in Duma, the Syrian forces, the Russian forces, the OPCW, they're not finding that there are any dead people. They're not finding that there were any patients who went to the hospitals. It's just not there.
And wouldn't it be politically advantageous for the warmongers to parade around the little itty-bitty baby caskets and have these burials where we could go to the location and pay our respects and all that? And isn't it true that they bury their dead right away?
Yes, they definitely do. And, usually there's video of the funerals. Everybody's got a cell phone over there. But this is looking more and more like it was kind of a rush job. Because if you remember about a month ago when Russia started warning that this false flag was going to happen, the Syrian forces actually apparently halted a couple of these false flags. So all they had left was a video put together by the White Helmets, and they really apparently didn't have the resources to stage funerals or anything to go along with it. So there's a complete absence of evidence. But again, the thinking was, we're going to claim there was a gas attack, and we're going to launch the war before anybody can say no.
Right. It seems like George Soros's financial tentacles are in gun control, in this, and everything else that's bad.
Well, it's not Soros. We're now finding out that the U.S. government is giving the Soros organizations U.S. taxpayer dollars. They're using him as a cutout and a front to go on out and push these various agendas so the U.S. government can maintain plausible deniability. Not that anybody would believe a denial from the U.S. government about any of this stuff anymore.
So then, Michael, my last question is, and it's your opinion I trust the most out of everybody. If this is going on and the president receives these briefings, is he compromised? Is he insulated? Is he going along with it? Why are there so many Obama holdovers that haven't been fired, these really bad people in big positions?
Well, again, I was saying all the way back to the inauguration, Trump's biggest mistake coming into the White House was trying to be magnanimous in victory and saying to all the Obama people, you can stay on. And his assumption at that time was now that he was the boss, they would be loyal to him, because that's how it works in the world of business. A new CEO comes on in, and all the employees are now loyal to him. That's not how it works in Washington, D.C. politics, and it betrays Trump's high degree of naivete about just how politics works inside Washington, D.C., which has always been one of his greatest weaknesses. I'm sure that Trump is smart enough to have realized just how phony that whole gas attack story was. And initially, he was right on board with it, calling Assad an animal who gasses his own people and enjoys it. But now he's backing off. And thankfully, he's got at least one advisor, Mattis, who's saying, we need to tread carefully here, or we're going to find ourselves in a conflict that is going to be very, very costly. They're not saying that Russia would win. They're just saying that a U.S. victory would cost more than it's really worth.
And I think the fact that there's no burials, and it's way too late to stage it now, I think the fact that there's no burials is a smoking gun. I think the omission of that, it also just piles on that this is all a bunch of BS.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the problem is the war hawks are probably going to stage something else, and next time they'll work to make it a little more convincing. But given the track record of all the lies we've been told about Assad gassing his people that have been exposed as frauds, nobody's going to believe it, no matter how convincing it is. But the people who want that war in Syria, they're going to keep pushing, by hook or by crook.
I don't trust anytime the Democrats or Republicans both agree on anything is a red flag.
I agree.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining the network. And we're going to go to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
What's on my mind, Mike? It's not over yet because, you got the tricky British, the French, and the Israelis. So they got a lot of tricks up their sleeves. So, this ain't over yet. The next couple of days are going to be pretty scary because we're there. There's still stuff moving around. So, I don't know yet, Mike. I think we're still in that danger area time period there.
Oh, absolutely, no question.
Because, the French and the British have a lot to lose. They need to start something. And the elements in Israel and they don't have many chances left. You know what I mean? In Syria, because he pretty much won the war. It's basically mop-up operations now. There's some pockets left, but it's so I just don't want everybody to get all that everything's being stood down and
No, that would be very, very foolish. We're still in the danger zone, and again, I think we can expect another even more serious false flag attack. They may even try a chemical weapon attack here in the United States and say Assad did it. They're going to have to go for something that's almost as big and shocking as 9/11 was to basically terrorize the American people past the capability of thinking rationally.
And Mike, General Dunford, I think was the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He probably told Trump that the Sixth Fleet would be gone. Because the Russians can knock them out.
Yes.
So that's more than a pause, right? How many people on an aircraft carrier? 2,000.
Well, it depends on the carrier, but yeah, it can be between 2,000 and 3,000 people, and that's not even counting the air wing.
Yeah. Hey, Mike, on that mercenary group from Britain you mentioned yesterday, it's Britain Defense. Yeah, they were linked with Qatar, hired them to get a chemical weapon shell that matched an old-style Soviet Union shell that looked like Assad would have in his arsenal. And it was a chemical weapon basically it was a mercenary. So you got a lot of these Blackwater type companies, they'll do anything for money, Mike. That's the scary thing too, right?
Yes.
But that's all I wanted to say, Mike. So I just want, like I said, it's not over yet.
No, it isn't.
No?
It isn't. We've pushed them back this one time. We've won this skirmish. We are a long way away from winning the war against war.
All right, Mike, have a good show.
All right, thanks an awful lot here. Now, interestingly enough, over in Italy, their media is already reporting on the facts that are coming out of Duma, and they're reporting none of the Western journalists who've been invited in by the Russian army, and they're free to basically go anywhere undisturbed, take any pictures they want anywhere, talk to anyone. They have yet to find any trace or testimony of this supposed attack that happened back on the 7th. And what we're seeing in the corporate media is they're retrieving old, outdated photos and movies produced by the rebels years ago and trying to present them as current news to convince the public of the absolute need for retaliation against the Assad regime. But again, the people who are there on the ground, the Russian chemical weapons experts, the OPCW, they can't find anything. There are no bodies. None of the hospitals in the area saw any patients that had any kind of chemical weapons injuries. All right, we're going to take another phone call. Francis in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello to you both on the 13th.
Yes.
Go figure. Two quick thoughts for you. I'm guessing finally now that since Sauron is the enemy of Middle Earth, then Soros is the enemy of Upper Earth.
Yeah, I was wondering about that ring he was wearing. The one with the glowing red letters.
Going there? Yeah, go figure. You had mentioned about on yesterday's show about teachers being prescribed to use a baseball bat in the event of being attacked or whatever, or being invaded and so forth.
Yeah, and it's not even a full-length baseball bat. It's not even a full baseball bat.
Yeah.
It's only 16 inches long.
I thought that was absolutely hilarious. But you know something? I think they were a little bit misguided on that. What they really should have recommended to the teachers is to make sure they have a good-sized bag of marbles, that whenever they look out the door and see that there's someone down the hall getting ready to start firing down the hall, just quietly lower themselves down to the floor and take one good swoosh and send the marbles rolling down the hallway in front of the person who's got the firearm, and then see what happens.
That probably is going to work better than the baseball bat, I would say. Somebody actually called into our switchboard and said, give the teachers a tranquilizer gun. The problem with that is, of course, the tranquilizer would take too long to take effect, and the gunman is still going to be dangerous, depending upon the tranquilizer, for 30 seconds to a minute after that, unless you load those darts with shellfish toxin. And if you're going to do that, just go ahead and give the teachers a gun.
Oh, I'd rather have the marbles. Anyway,
I'd rather have an
later.
AK. If I were a teacher in a school and there was a threat of an active shooter, I want an AK. That's what I want.
Oh, there you go.
Yep.
Have fun, y'all. Later.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Now, even though SecDef Mattis appears to be the voice of caution in the White House meetings, he's still out there publicly still talking, trying to bolster the propaganda. And he's actually come on out and admitted the U.S. government has no evidence of the Syria chemical attack, but Mattis believes there was one. And, of course, I'm sure that when he was younger, Mattis believed in Santa Claus and the Easter Rabbit and Superman and Batman. And it's another reminder of why foreign policy should not be set on the matter of belief. Or, for that matter, you know, the mood of the president when he wakes up in the morning, which seems to be what's driving his Twitter comments here. Now, the CIA director is out there trying to prove they're tough on Russians and saying that a couple of hundred Russians have been killed in U.S. strikes in Syria. And see, it shows that we're tough on them, and the Russians have met their match because the U.S. has killed hundreds of them in Syria. See how butch we are here. Well, you know, killing Russian nationals in a country to which you don't actually have permission to be, that's a very, very dangerous situation. Let's take another phone call. Rick in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I sent you an email yesterday. Excuse me. I sent you an email. You may have already seen the video I sent you about the 6 million Jews who were killed in World War II.
Not sure that I saw it. And
well, it's for humor. You put up with so much every day. I kind of feel sorry for you. I send it for humor to you. I just hope you watch it.
I'll look for it on the next commercial break here based on your first name, okay?
Okay, thanks.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Now then, let's take a real hard look at what's going on in Syria. These are the weapons that Russia is known to have already deployed in Syria. There may be others we don't know of, but this is what Secretary of Defense Mattis was probably thinking about when he urged that we should exercise caution just going on in to Syria. First of all, Russia has deployed the S-400 surface-to-air missiles, and basically it's a very powerful air defense missile. They can track multiple targets simultaneously, and it is thought they may even be able to lock onto and destroy the F-35 and the F-22. They've also deployed what they call the Bastion Coastal Missile Defense System. And this is an anti-ship system that can reach out to 219 miles. And Syria is thought to have just bought this system from Russia. Then there's the Panzer S-1. We'll talk more about these weapons when we come back from these commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And once more, we're going to put on the bag here. I'd get down on my knees, but would take a chain hoist to get me back up again. We really need your support. There's no other way to say it. And it's hard for us to ask for your support because we understand that you are all in as serious financial straits as we are. But we're in a war against war. We're in a war against the lies that lead to war. And unfortunately, the bad guys have got all the money, and we need your help. The only way we're going to stop the influence of big money over our lives is for the little money to all band together in the common cause of restoring our republic and restoring peace to planet Earth. So, if you can help on out, and we really do need it, this is not a joke. The postal address where you can send a check or money order, or if you prefer anonymity, cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. If you want to phone on in and pledge to be a recurring subscriber, that number is 800-724-2719, extension 03. And for those of you who want to donate directly to whatreallyhappened.com, there is a donate button in the right margin of the main page of the website. So let's get on back here. We're talking about the weapons Russia is known to have in Syria, and I'm emphasizing known to have. There may be stuff there that we don't know about yet. They have the Panzer S-1. This is a truck-mounted short to medium-range surface-to-air missile and anti-aircraft artillery system. It's owned by both the Russian and Syrian government forces in Syria. Russia has deployed it around its Khmeimim air base and at its Tartus naval facility. This thing can shoot down cruise missiles. Russia has between 10 and 15 warships and their support vessels operating in the Mediterranean right now. They include the Admiral Grigorovich and Admiral Essen frigates, which are armed with cruise missiles. Russia also has submarines that are deployed into the Mediterranean. Now, most of the ships have left the Tartus naval facility, supposedly for a training exercise. The reality is they're dispersing the fleet so they're not all in one place and subject to an attack by the U.S. Apparently, Russia also has IL-38N anti-submarine hunter aircraft in the area, and I'll bet you they're trying to locate the USS Georgia right about now because that is a very potent platform. Russia has dozens of warplanes and helicopters at the Khmeimim Air Base in Latakia, fighters, bombers, multi-role aircraft, and it's apparently using another Syrian base for its helicopter gunships. Now, Russian helicopters are formidable. Back when the Soviet Union was in Afghanistan, there was sort of a running joke that the Mujahideen were not afraid of the Russians, but they were certainly afraid of those Russian helicopters. They're armored, they're very difficult to shoot down. Syria is known to have a mixture of Russian-made anti-aircraft systems, including the Panzer S-1 and the Buk M2 surface-to-air missile systems designed to shoot down cruise missiles, aircraft, and drones. So there's a lot of stuff there. We know that Russia has more potent missiles, including missiles that can attack aircraft carriers to which the U.S. has no defense against them. Basically, Ben Hodges, who's a retired U.S. Army Lieutenant General, former head of the U.S. Army in Europe, is saying the Russian military will have put in place multi-layered defenses to protect its aircraft and other assets, and has the capability to repel a U.S. attack. And that may be why Mattis was saying, let's think this over very, very carefully. Because if the U.S. were to attack Syria and Russia repel them, a defeat like that would just knock the wheels off the war wagon and just completely derail it. There would be no more public support for going into Iran or going into North Korea or any more military adventures, because the American people are just sick and tired of war. They're sick and tired of seeing this country literally rotting from neglect and decay because all of the wealth generated by the labor of the American people is being sucked away to feed the war machine, to feed Israel, to prop up Wall Street. We're a war-weary people. We've been at war with all these countries longer than we were in World War I and World War II put together. It's way too long. Now then, Italy, possibly because of the lack of evidence that any gas attack actually took place in Douma, is saying they will not take part in any military action in Syria. It's looking like NATO and the EU in general don't want anything to do with this. Obviously, France and Great Britain are going along with the U.S. agenda, but other countries like the Netherlands are saying no. Germany is saying they'll help with logistics, but they will not take part in any kind of an actual attack. So everybody's getting cold feet on that, mostly because that story about the gas attack in Duma didn't make sense from day one, and people are just picking up on the obviousness of this false flag. We're going to take another break for commercials. We got callers waiting on the line, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And before we go to the phones here, one of our listeners sent me an email. They went out and actually looked up the crew complement of the Nimitz-class aircraft carriers. The ship's company numbers 3,200. The air wing numbers 2,480. I imagine it might vary slightly from carrier to carrier, but basically we're talking about 5,600 people on an aircraft carrier. And those carriers are vulnerable to the latest generation of Russian anti-ship missiles. So that would be a major loss. Okay, let's go back to the phones. Mark in North Carolina, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How you doing, Mike? Mike, I saw something YouTube last night. It was on some kind of Russian, it wasn't an RT, it was on another Russian TV. It was in Russian, but they were translating. And they had this guy on there. They said he's the former head of Israeli intelligence, some guy named Yaakov.
Yeah.
He looked to me like a Russian. I mean, he talked like a Russian. That he was talking to all the other Russians there. I'm not sure whether they were media people or Duma, part of the Duma. And he was saying the generals in the United States are really getting worried, scared now, because they don't know how to fight a war like this. They've been so used to fighting these, small countries with, very backwards armies, and to fight a modern military like Russia has. I guess he wasn't even talking about nukes. They're getting very worried. And then I noticed that Mattis seems to be getting cold feet now. Because Mattis is not a real combat general. None of these guys are. He was basically in charge of Afghanistan, which is a guerrilla war. And by the time he took over, I don't think it was even as big as it had been before. But it's not a strategic thing. It's not where you're massing armies against armies, but fighting a country that has a real navy, real air force, and the real ability to knock down your planes and your missiles and destroy your ships. So I think that's what's happening right now. I think they thought Putin would walk the other way. I think maybe they underestimated the power of the Russian military today, and they thought probably Putin was going to back down. And now they see he's not. The other thing I understand, though, is that that bum Bolton, who shouldn't even be in there, this dangerous misfit, John Bolton.
Yes.
He's urging them to go along with it, along with Trump. And it's Mattis that's putting a restraining hand. Now I'm beginning to wonder about the sanity of Donald Trump. I really am. I'm really wondering whether that man is not out there. Maybe he thinks he's king of the world. I don't know what he thinks, but I'm really wondering about his sanity. I really think we made a big mistake.
I don't. Well, we didn't make a mistake because if Hillary had won the White House, we'd already be seeing mushroom clouds all over the place here. I don't think Trump is insane, but he's demonstrably weak. He's not in control. He's not being presidential, and that is a tremendous personal failing on his part. He's not a strong leader, he's a negotiator. He's a businessman, but he doesn't know how to lay down the law, and he'd better learn real quick. Because he's being directed and controlled by his advisors. Now, thank goodness Mattis is urging caution here. And I think what really triggered this decision to maybe pull back from attacking Syria was news that China was going to come on in and support Russia. The Chinese ships operating in the Mediterranean have already been given orders. If there's a U.S. attack, they will come to the aid of the Russian ships.
I don't even think, I'll be honest with you, I don't even think the Russians need them. I mean, these ships are dinosaurs. They'd basically be a target practice for what I think the Russians have more, when Putin showed those supersonic weapons that they have, I think he's got these submarine. I think they're deployed already. I think they're ready. I think you would start. I think the guy who was on before who said say goodbye to the Sixth Fleet, I think pretty much that's what would happen. Now the question is, after that, what would happen? Would that then start the nukes, or would we just back off and realize, and we're not the only superpower in the world anymore? I don't know.
I'm afraid that if Russia were to sink one of our major ships, that it might escalate to a nuclear exchange. And I've been saying all along, if we get into a conflict with Russia and or China, on the day the U.S. realizes they can't win conventionally, they'll resort to the nuclear weapons. And I still think that that's going to be the case. We were talking about the weapons Russia is known to have in Syria. I would be willing to bet they already have some of the K-32 missiles, the anti-ship missiles, the supersonic ones that maneuver during the terminal phase. I'm sure they probably have a bunch of those along the Syrian coast by now.
Russians do not seem scared at all. They don't seem intimidated. I see a lot of the YouTube things. Alex Jones had a guy on, a Russian news reporter, who seemed very, he was warned. Don't do it. He said American boys are going to, in the Midwest, the West, South, Middle America, are going to be manning those M16s, and the globalists who send them there are going to be nice and safe. And I guess that's considering a ground war with her, but but hopefully better minds are going to prevail in this, because can't afford this. This is too dangerous. This could literally mean the end of the world, because that's what would happen in nuclear exchange. Let's be honest about it.
Yes.
I mean, you could say, all right, they're going to knock out military bases, but say one side is more successful in doing that than the other. Next thing you're going to know is the cities start going up in smoke, or in nuclear in the nuclear cloud. All right. It's a shame that the people are so ignorant today that they don't understand. When you and me were kids, like, we understood what a nuclear bomb would do. We understood. We knew how. We had to hide under desks and stuff for the shelter drills and all that, and we had fallout shelters all over the places. In New York City, where I grew up at the time, subway was considered a fallout shelter.
Yes.
Signs and all that. We don't have those shelters anymore. That's another thing. The Russians are better equipped for a nuclear war than we are. They have shelters and stuff for their citizens, not for their elites. We have it for the bunkers for the elite, so-called elites, for the rich people and for the powerful people in government. We don't even have it for the average citizen.
No, we don't.
We got to take this country back, Mike, before it's too late, before it's destroyed. I don't feel that this is my government anymore. I don't feel loyal to it. I feel loyal to the country, but not to the bums anymore who run it. If I was in the military today, I'll be honest with you, I'd probably desert. I'd go to another country, or I would say, I'm not going to your stupid wars. Put the cuffs on me and put me in Leavenworth, and that one, in the stockade, and that's it. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't. Not knowing what I know, when I was in the Army, I didn't understand a lot of stuff because we didn't have those things like the internet at the time. You know what I mean?
Yes.
All I could go on was the mainstream news, the garbage I read in the newspapers. That's not the case. And the average soldier today, the average 18, 19, 20, 21, 22-year-old, they don't get their news from the mainstream media. They know what's going on. You might even see some kind of a insurrection in the military before this is over, if it gets too bad. It wouldn't surprise me. And if you do have to, and if it's a prolonged fight, let's say it doesn't go nuclear and it's a prolonged fight, they're going to have a draft. If they have a draft, this country is going to split itself wide open at the seams. Young people today are not going to put up with that garbage. They really aren't. They know
I certainly hope not. I mean, for us, our old people, we're not going to be around all that much longer anyway. The young people, the millennials, they're going to inherit this mess if this gets out of control. They're the ones who are going to have to wander around the aftermath of a nuclear war.
Also, the what do you call it? The Generation Z, that's like from that's under 20 years old and stuff, and they're even more knowledgeable than millennials, who a lot of them are going to be ignorant. Just look at their iPhones, not for information, but just all the Generation Z, I understand, is a lot more into things. They're a lot more understanding, and you're not a lot more Ron Paul type, Rand Paul type. And that's another thing. I hope Rand Paul now challenges Trump in a primary, or I hope he forms a third party and maybe aligns himself with somebody like Cynthia McKinney. I know there's differences. One's that, she's far more liberal in certain things than he is, but I think they could work things out together. Or Rand Paul and Tulsi Gabbard, who's also tweeting out a lot of stuff about how bad this thing is now.
Yeah.
That he could possibly unite with her. Because I think they could win. I really do. There's enough, even with, as far as money goes, collecting money, because of the internet, you don't need all these big contributions from all these, from Sheldon, what's his name, Sheldon Edelman or something, or
Adelson. Sheldon Adelson.
Edelman, you don't, or from the Koch brothers, or any of these people. You can collect right on the internet, and I think pretty much that's what Bernie Sanders did. And I think that's what's going to have to happen, because we're not Trump. I pretty much put Trump out of my mind. I mean, to me, he's a failure already.
I agree. I agree. I'm very disappointed.
And I wonder about his sanity. And by the way, about those Russians that were supposedly killed, there was not 200 Russians. I think there were a few. There were contractors.
Yes.
RT reported on it, and Crosstalk. But there were a few were killed. If the amount were killed that they say, and let's say some of them were Spetsnaz or something like that, even though that would have mixed in with them, I think a bunch of our people would have been killed already.
I would absolutely agree. Basically, what the U.S. government is trying to do is save face. They've been forced to back down from the Russians, and that's why they're out there saying, well, we gave them what for? We've killed a whole bunch of them. So, Russia has met its match. It's pure, BS to try and save face because the U.S. is being forced to back off this attack on Syria.
And as far as Vladimir Putin goes, I get a lot of stuff on my Facebook from Cynthia McKinney. She calls him real leader of the free world today.
Yes.
And I kind of agree. He's respected. He's respected in most parts of the world, maybe not in Western Europe, not a globalist, a scum in Western Europe, but he's respected around the world. And even the Chinese, I think, respect him a lot more than they respect our leadership. He's a Japanese like him, a lot of European countries. And I think what he's got to do, though, he's got to get the confidence in Eastern Europe again, because they think of the Soviet Union, that the Soviets, occupied them for so long. But remember this, that was the Soviet Union. They weren't all Russian. Actually, Khrushchev, for instance, was a Ukrainian.
Yes.
Stalin was a Georgian. Those are separate countries now. It was a union of different countries put together and practicing communism. Russia today is totally different. There's much more in common between Russia and Poland than there is, I think, between Poland and the United States, or certainly than Western Europe. There's there are religious beliefs and all that, which you don't even have which the West is, well, not the United States so much. Western Europe, you got every one of the Western Europe leaders. They're the major powers in Western Europe right now. May in England, Macron in France, and what's her name in Germany?
Merkel.
Anyway, huh?
Merkel. Angela
What's
Merkel.
the woman in Germany? Merkel, yeah, Merkel. Okay. None of them have any kids. I don't know if they're married, but they don't have any. Well, I know Macron is married. None of them have any kids. They didn't even think about the future. This is one of the reasons I think they're so crazy. I even start sometimes, I listen to David Icke, or watch David Icke sometimes. And I kind of think, when you talk about the reptilians and all that, but sometimes I look at these people and they're so nasty, so evil.
The sociopaths.
He definitely named the royal family as one of them. I know Richie Allen believes a lot of it. He seems to think David Icke's right and a lot of stuff. But I don't know. When I look at how evil these people are, I start wondering sometimes whether maybe there isn't some kind of outer worldly.
No, it's just they're sociopaths. They're sociopaths, and they really do think differently. They have absolutely no sense of guilt. They're totally obsessed with themselves, and they're oblivious to the harm their actions cause to others. Anyway, Mark, the phone lines are loading up. We're short on time here, so thank you for the call. We're going to let you go and switch over to Dave in Missouri. Dave, thank you for waiting patiently. What's on your mind?
Well, howdy, Mike. I hope you're off to a blessed day. It's been very windy here in the Midwest today, so I'm hoping you're having a beautiful day. You know, I just think maybe we're missing something, and that is, you know, I understand everybody's concern. I mean, we travel this country all the time, and it is such a glorious planet that we live on. I mean, it's really beyond even comprehension, just the beauty and the magnificence of it, so that there could be such an evil that would risk destroying such beauty. You know, it's just mind-boggling. But what I think we might be missing here, and I understand everybody's concern, is that, hey, we have a president who's willing to maybe walk back on things. It's not his ego that's pushing him, perhaps, like we were all afraid of. Maybe, you know, he acts rashly. I'm not saying I wouldn't in such a situation. But then as facts come in, he can change his mind. He can do a 180. And so, you know, the fact that we were all, you know, terrified that maybe we're heading in, you've seen the Russian ships deployed, you know, everybody's scattered, you're hearing all this war talk, just maybe, and that would certainly have come to fruition had the Democrats and liberals had their way and we had Hillary on us. I'm sure we're all aware of that. If we weren't in internment camps by now, we'd certainly be at war with Russia. But Trump, hey, we have a president who's maybe willing to walk it back, maybe willing to look at you know, I mean, put it out there as a caveat for people, and then listen to what people say and act on it. You know, not take us into further war, but maybe avert it.
Well,
and so
don't forget, before the claimed gas attack in Duma, Trump was talking about pulling out of Syria. And the word from inside the White House was that he was fed up with how long the U.S. had been there, that there really didn't seem to be a clear way that they could get Assad out, that he was ready to basically throw it on in. Then there was this claim of a gas attack. His advisors all said, we got to go on in. So Trump started talking tough to impress apparently the American people and brought us to the edge of an actual conflict. And at this point, SecDef Mattis said, we'd better really rethink this, because even if we were to win against Syria and Russia in Syria, the cost might be overwhelming in terms of the loss of ships. So it may be that Trump's advisors are the ones who are starting to rethink the war, except, of course, for John Bolton, who never met a war he didn't like. Anyway, Dave, I'm sorry. I'm going to have to let you go. We got to take a commercial break. We got other callers waiting on the line, and we'll be back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to take 3 more phone calls, and then we're going to close the phone lines because I got a lot of news to get through, and I really need to focus on that. So let's go to Cab in New York. Aloha, Cab. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha. What's on my mind is World War III, and I've been listening to your program, and you've really got a lot of, you know, you're my best hope, actually. I'm very disappointed because, you know, I think the pastors should be speaking up, and I'd like to know where they are. They're quiet as a church mouse, and I guess that's what they are, mice. They're just little scared mice, and they're not going to speak up, and they're not going to stand for what's right. And I guess they're too busy watching football or, I don't know, dusting off their canned sermons or whatever they're doing, but they're not doing their job. And when this all happens, if it does, which it's all in the Bible, that's my whole point here. All of this is all in the Bible. It's like, why are they not reading their Bible? Why are they not warning us? There's so much scripture. It's like the last days. We are in the last days, and there's so much about the United States, you know, in the Bible about how we come to our crashing end and how God is really disgusted with this country. He says, like in Jeremiah, there's a lot, Isaiah, Revelation, of course, but it says, you know, God says that we were once a golden cup in the Lord's hand and we would have healed her, but she is not healed. Well, you know, it's not like we can't be healed. We could be healed if somebody would just, the pastors would do their job, because it is it's all spiritual. And Satan is a real person, and he is the one running this planet, and he uses greed and money, and it seems like that's all anybody cares about, and so we're all going to die because people don't have principles anymore, and they're not willing to put their priorities in the right order. So
Well,
I don't know. I know
think
you're
that
not
applies to
big
everybody.
on Bible stuff, but your wife is, but
Yeah,
I just want to, put in the word here that I've been writing to these pastors with using my internet and saying, come on, guys, do your job. When are you going to speak up?
Well, a lot of this began with George Bush's faith-based charities, where the government was using churches for certain social programs, and with that came a lot of money. And at the time this happened, it was basically a way of bringing the churches under the control of the government so that they wouldn't speak out against the impending war agenda. And a lot of pastors who have congregations with a significant amount of military people in them are also afraid of speaking out against the war policy out of fear that those members of the congregation are going to leave and that collection plate's going to be a little bit lighter. So unfortunately, there's a financial incentive there as well. I kind of like the way Mark Twain described the situation. He said, we all began a little lower than the angels, and we've been getting a little lower ever since. Anyway, listen, Cab, I'm going to have to let you go. We got to do a station identification. We'll be back with hour number 2. A couple more phone calls, then we're going to close the lines and get back to some news. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, hour number 2. We're going to take 2 more phone calls, then we're going to close the phone lines because I'm already way behind on my talking points. And, of course, an hour from now, the lovely Lady Claire will be joining the show. Curtis in Nevada, thank you for waiting so patiently. What is on your mind today?
Yeah, that lady who asked about the pastors, if you look at the 501c3 tax exemptions,
yes,
that if you speak out against the government or anything political, you could lose your tax exemption. But it really, what it means, anything that the government disagrees with, and they'll come after you for tax exemption. So anyway, Mike, it's kind of disappointing to hear people continuing to react to just current situations, and they just talk about what they see directly in front of them, but the long-term thing about what Trumpsters are doing, I see the same pattern they did with North Korea, and I actually think that Trump actually instigated purposely by making that announcement to get that reaction. Okay, and I really think what's going to happen is they're going to have a big face-off in the Middle East regarding Syria. You're going to have two sides making stink face, like to say, at each other and calling each other liars. And they might even do something as far as, pop off a few missiles in the desert on an empty building, kind of like they did before. And there is going to be back channels where Putin's going to know, and nobody's going to get hurt. And that would be, hopefully, the worst thing that could happen in this case, But if everybody can pay attention, I think the war has been going on. Shots have been fired. This was just a recent battle. And I think the deep state is waiting that they can hold on for the November elections. And if things can go well for them, they can ride out Trump. Okay? And that to me is important, that they stop Trump in his processing the prosecutions. He got stopped from all the bad things that were happening October until December. Those were shots being fired by the deep state, and there's a standoff. And if that standoff continues until the November elections, we might lose those elections. That's what I'm worried about. What do you think of that?
Well, we know that the Democrats are doing everything they can to steal those elections in November, but I disagree with your analysis regarding Putin for the simple reason that right now the world is seeing the U.S. as being forced to back down. And if the U.S. were to just do a little attack into Syria and blow a few things up in the hope that Putin wouldn't respond, I don't think that's going to happen, because it would make it look like Putin was the one who was starting to back down. And right now he's got the upper hand, and he doesn't want to lose that. So I think, unfortunately, if the U.S. does anything in Syria at this point that threatens Russian assets or Russian personnel, Russia will respond.
Yeah, it depends on what's done. I mean, if he hurts Russians, yeah, I agree. He will respond because he has to. But you remember when Trump was calling out Bush for the weapons of mass destruction that weren't there. I mean, the same thing could happen to him. If it's proven that nothing happened and he did something, it's going to make him look bad. So I agree. I hope nothing happens. I hope they just yell at each other and they all go home. That's what I hope to see.
Well, I hope that's what's going to happen. Unfortunately, the war hawks, I don't think are going to give on up. I'm expecting there'll be another really horrible false flag attack. I think they're going to go ahead and actually gas a bunch of people in Syria, and they're willing to basically kill a bunch of people to get the war going. And unfortunately, war hawks are willing to kill people to get a war going. Roosevelt was willing to see all those people killed in the attack on Pearl Harbor to get the U.S. into World War II. Woodrow Wilson was willing to see all those people on the Lusitania drown to get the U.S. into World War I. That's how these things get done.
Yeah, but this whole gas attack thing, false flag thing, I think that they're losing that option. It's becoming so incredible that I don't think that's going to work for them anymore. They'll have to find another way to do it,
I'm sure they're thinking about that right now. Like I said, they could do a sarin gas attack right here in the United States and claim this was Bashar al-Assad. And the idea is to have something as psychically shocking as 9/11 itself, so the American people won't be able to think clearly about what's going on. That's going to be the inevitable next step. They can't have another gas attack in some out-of-the-way place somewhere in Syria. People have become numb to it. The U.S. government has gone back to that well way too many times, and they've been discredited too many times.
Mike, there's plenty of Democrats left out there with a sense of justice and law and order that we have to show them publicly that there's criminality on their side, because those are the ones that are going to decide the election. Our side, we know, and the other side, they have enough that they don't care about law and order. But there's enough older Democrats that we have to show them. Here's the documentation for all your side, all the criminality that's been going on. That's the way they have to do it, and they got to get started by the summer.
Unfortunately, the criminality is on both sides. This rush to war is bipartisan. Bush was pushing for the wars, Clinton was pushing for the wars, Obama was pushing for the wars, and now Trump is pushing for the wars, or at least his advisors are pushing for the wars.
The Republicans know that. We have to show them too, but they're all based, most of them are based on law and order, the rule of law. But the Democrats, the older Democrats, they're still running because of Kennedy, those kind of things. They're the party of the people against the Republicans, the rich guys. They still think that way, and we have to get that out of their mind and show them who they're supporting.
Yeah, I remember when I was younger when the Republicans were always considered the war party and the Democrats were considered the peaceniks. That's obviously been reversed.
Right.
Anyway, Curtis, thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go. We're going to take one more phone call, then we're closing the phone lines. Mike in Chicago, thank you for being so patient. What's on your mind?
Yeah, again, the banking cartel, the central banking cartel, wants global domination, but the way they're going about getting it is open border policy, is unbridled illegal immigration, debt that's never going to be repaid ever, like with the central banks in Europe, Japan, and the United States repay. So, and then you have these different countries, Russia, the Middle East, and China. But again, in order for this new system to come in, you got to ask yourself, well, do they need to destroy the United States in order for this to happen, or is the United States going to be the one behind this global order? It's only a matter of time. Again, you're seeing the policies of open borders, illegal immigration. That's never going to be repaid back. So what is going to have to happen in this war, and it's going to come, the aftermath is going to be a reset that probably will entail all currencies are going to be gone, and then it'll be replaced somehow digitally, perhaps. But I think before we get to that, see, the thing is, it's timing, because like Bitcoin, the Federal Reserve is studying Bitcoin. They really don't have a clue on how they would be able to use it yet. But that will come to be. But again, the system is going to have to be done away with. It's just a matter of time before it blows up. I mean, they're trying to pop it up right now. I mean, and it's not really working because they're gonna have to go to QE4 probably, and just start buying everything under the sun in order to keep this thing from exploding. So, is it war that is going to be the answer to bringing in this new system, and are the bankers going to be behind it? The central banking cartel, are they going to be behind this new world order? This new order of things to come. And again, how many people are going to have to die? But one thing we know for sure, this system is going to explode. It's going to collapse, right? So
Yes.
we're trying to figure out when. And, I don't know if it's going to be in my life. I'm 53 right now, and I got a pretty long way to go. I mean, so it could, but you can see everything happening all around the world. Open borders, money printing, a debt that's never going to get. They're just. It seems like they have a system in plan. So everybody in the whole world is going to be like marked digitally, and you're not going to be able to buy or sell at all. That's going to be the new system, and therefore there probably won't be any debt anymore or any worry about open borders, because we're just we're going to be all people.
Well, let me respond to what you're saying. Let me respond to what you've said up to this point. The people pushing for a one-world government and the New World Order have been trying to do it by tricking nations into surrendering their sovereignty. We're seeing that in the European Union right now. The EU began simply as a free trade, free travel zone, and then all of a sudden Brussels started grabbing more and more power, and now they're talking about integration into a United States of Europe. And the individual member nations, they don't want to do that. They're starting to push back. The only time war would be necessary is against those nations that don't want to be part of the New World Order, which would be Russia and China. And for that, they need the U.S. military. But at some point, the New World Order, there has to be just this image of one planet. And they can't keep the name United States of America around after that. To what extent the U.S. would physically be challenged or altered, we don't know. But I'll tell you what I think is going to happen. If we get into a shooting war with Russia and China, regardless of whether there are nuclear bombs or not, I think it's actually going to destroy the movement for a one-world government, and we're going to see the rest of the world go back to being lots and lots of little tiny countries that are going to be very, very scared about allowing anybody to become a big country, because big countries tend to be troublemakers. We could literally see ourselves descending into a new dark ages rather than this high-tech dystopian future.
Yeah, a very good point. You remember, like you got the African Union, the Asian Union, and we were supposed to have the North American Union. Wow, that really used to freak me out. But you haven't heard about even the Amero, like a new type of a currency, an Amero.
Yes.
Dollar. Yeah, I mean, it seems like that was another attempt, to create a world order without shooting guns, or this big war that everybody's worried about to get it to happen, right? You know what I mean? So, but if it does happen and we go to war, like you just said, yeah, that's awesome that you said that, because we could go back into the dark ages instead of to the future of Bitcoin and coin this and token that, all the rest of it, the digital future. You know what I mean? could be stopped in its tracks, and we could be thrown back into the dark ages. Wow, that's great. I appreciate
Well,
it.
just
Listen, Mike, thanks for the,
let me give you a scenario here. Let me give you a scenario here. Russia's already testing their anti-satellite weapons, and they've already made it very clear, and so has the U.S., that in the opening days of a real world war, they're going to be shooting each other's satellites out of orbit, and that in turn is going to turn Earth orbit into this flying shrapnel field, meaning it's going to be a very, very long time before anybody can put up any new satellites. That means the communication satellites are going to be gone, and they're talking about cyber warfare that could just destroy computers all over the globe and really take us back to the 1900s in terms of our technology. We're certainly seeing the rise of religious fanaticism in virtually every major one of the world's religions. The fall of the American Empire could trigger a new Dark Ages, the way the fall of the Roman Empire triggered the original Dark Ages. And that's what I think that could really happen. I think a world war is going to be the end of the one world government idea.
Yeah, I'm sorry, when I was back in university, graduate, cognitive psychology, the professor was asking the class, look at how we depend on a process. Everything's processed to us. We really don't make anything anymore. Anything from doing your clothes to your food, everything's just done. You wouldn't have a clue if the manufacturing and factories that we depend on stop how to produce anything. You know what I mean? That we would be thrown back.
Yeah, that's the problem with modern appliances, which are not designed to be repairable. And if the factories are destroyed and your smartphone and your tablet wear out and you throw them away, you can't get a new one, at least not until somebody comes up with it. At least at the end of World War II, cars and appliances were designed to be repaired by their end users. And so during the period where Europe and Japan were rebuilding, they were able to get by keeping the surviving hardware running. We don't have that advantage. So we're really in a corner. Anyway, Mike, got to let you go. We're going to close the phone lines here. I got to get back to the news. We're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates rejoining the network. Okay, story out of Zero Hedge. Russia has announced they have irrefutable evidence that Great Britain was involved in staging this fake Syrian chemical attack. And they're saying that the white helmets were making this video and everything. They had the help of a foreign secret service, and they've identified it as Great Britain coming on in and lending their support. This prompted the United States State Department to come on out and say, how silly. Of course, Great Britain isn't involved in this false flag attack. It's absolutely ridiculous. It was the Syrian government. And anybody who disagrees with us is being disloyal and needs to go into an internment camp, which, by the way, is being seriously proposed right now by no less than General Wesley Clark. Disloyal Americans have to be rounded up and put in internment camps. Gee, I hope they're going to let me have time to pack a suitcase or two. The Russian envoy has come on out wagging a finger at the World Health Organization for putting out the statement that some 500 Syrian people were injured by this gas attack and asked for medical help in the Syrian city of Douma. And it was a reckless statement for the World Health Organization to make, because interviews with the doctors at the hospitals in the area have yet to find anybody who treated a patient with chemical weapons injuries. Now, the tough talk is still continuing. Apparently, a former general is warning that the Kremlin could bomb Cyprus and sink U.S. ships if Russian blood is shed, that there will be a retaliation. Meanwhile, over in Israel, they're threatening to simply disappear Assad if Iran retaliates for the attack on the Syrian base. So the tough talk is going on there. And I look at that word about disappear Assad and wonder if Israel is sending a veiled threat to use their nuclear weapons, which would be politically very costly for Israel because it would prove to the world Israel does have nuclear weapons. They've had them all along. And that every penny of U.S. tax money sent to Israel is a violation of numerous U.S. laws saying that your money cannot be given to any country in possession of nuclear weapons technology that refuses to sign the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and allow IAEA inspections. Meanwhile, Iran is coming on back saying that if Israel attacks, that Tel Aviv and Haifa will be razed. So the tough talk is continuing down there. We're not out of the woods on this one. It's good that the U.S. Is sort of showing a little bit of caution, but we're still in a dangerous time here right now. We got to take a break for commercials. Back with more news after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, over in Manbij, the Kurds are receiving new weapons, and despite the pullback from this ridiculous false flag gas story, Western nations are intensifying their activities in northern Syria. And apparently their new rationale is we've got to support the Kurdish forces. And of course, tensions are now building between Washington and Ankara. Apparently, the U.S.-led coalition has set up a coordination center with the Kurds to protect Manbij from the Turkish army attacks. Little reminder here. The United States and its so-called coalition do not have the permission of Syria to be there. This is all illegal. It's a violation of international law. Trump does not have a declaration of war against anybody from Congress, which is required under the Constitution. He does not have a United Nations Security Council resolution. So it's still ongoing over there. Now, we're starting to see this schism open up between the neocons and the patriots. And this is basically defined by newsfromtheperimeter.com. Basically saying that people with the voice of reason, people who understand these wars serve nobody but corporate interests and the bankers, and they think it's time for it to stop. Those are the patriots, loyal to the country, loyal to their people. And on the other side are the neocons who want to use military might of the United States to basically smash all of Israel's competitors in the region. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the show, Russia has had a test flight of what's called the Nudol missile. It's their 6th test. It was a success. And apparently this is a transporter-mounted anti-satellite missile. It launches from the ground. It can reach into low Earth orbit and wipe out U.S. navigation, communications, and spy satellites in orbit. Now, the U.S. supposedly has their own anti-satellite weapons. They tested one near here in Hawaii. I think it was about a year and a half ago. And again, the danger of that is that we could turn near-Earth orbit into essentially a minefield, where all these bits and pieces of shattered satellites are just whizzing around in orbits, pieces that are too small to track, and it would literally trap mankind on Earth. Would be the end of space exploration, would be the end of space exploitation. But the people who are favoring war, they don't think long term. They don't think about the aftermath. We have to have victory now, and who cares what happens afterwards? It's a very short-sighted way of thinking about it. Little article that came out from LiveLeak, basically in response to that video that came out of Saudi Arabia about how the Patriot missile batteries failed miserably against an incoming missile from Yemen. In fact, one of the missiles appeared to double back and strike near its launcher. And so this article is out there. Is the Patriot missile worthless? And they're looking at its capabilities and its shortcomings. Now, during the first war in Iraq, they deployed the Patriot to Israel to protect Israel from incoming Scud missiles. And they proclaimed the success rate for interceptions was 90%. Then when the war was over, they hemmed and hawed and said, well, actually it was closer to 50%. And when you intercept a missile carrying biological weapons, it's still going to come down somewhere in your territory. Maybe not the intended target, but it's going to come down somewhere. Later, experts were saying that the Patriot's success rate was actually down in the single digits. Now, obviously, they've been trying to improve it since then, but it just may not be effective. Now, we've been talking about the vulnerability of the U.S. aircraft carriers, and there was an embarrassment some years ago. They were carrying out war games down near the Bahamas, and a French submarine called the Saphir was able to sneak in past the screening ships and simulate torpedoing the Theodore Roosevelt. And apparently that was not the only embarrassment. Back in 2005, during war games, the USS Ronald Reagan was taken out by a Swedish submarine, again simulated. And the Swedish submarine was able to escape the area without a scratch. The carriers are vulnerable. And these two incidents are using older technology against the new generation of hypersonic anti-ship sea-skimming missiles. They're sitting ducks. They are as much a dinosaur militarily as the battleship was going into World War II. But the Navy likes to cling onto the big, expensive ships. And I think I mentioned yesterday, there's actually a military expert saying it's time to reactivate those Iowa-class battleships. There are 4 of them left. They're currently loaned by the U.S. Navy to museums. We have one down here at the bottom of the hill. But they can, in fact, be recalled to service and started back up again. Cost a lot of money. They got to put all the weapons back on there. So we're going to take another break for commercials, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, since the end of World War II, there have been 248 armed conflicts on planet Earth. 201 of them were started by the United States. That's 81%. And in those 201 wars started by the United States, it is estimated 30 million people have been killed. I know it's a bitter pill to swallow. We're the bad guys going into the Third World War. Now, Sun Tzu, in his Art of War, right at the very beginning of the book, and if you haven't read the book, you should. At the very beginning of the book, he talks about the things that a ruler must have to win in war. One of them is he must have a military that believes in the moral rightness of the war so that they will fight fiercely and, if necessary, die to win. The second thing that a ruler must have to win a war is a civilian population that believes in the moral rightness of the war so that they will bear the burdens war brings even to the victorious side. The U.S. government has neither of those. We, the people, know these wars are all based on lies and deceptions. They're being fought for corporate interests. The military rank and file understand these are not moral and just wars. And that's another reason why I think the U.S. is going to lose this one. And I know the people in Washington, D.C., they want to say the U.S. has never lost a war. Well, we obviously lost in Vietnam, and we didn't exactly win in Korea. And if you include all the covert attempts at regime change, the U.S. is only batting 500. They only succeed 50% of the time. The U.S. military is not invincible, especially with our latest generation of hideously expensive weapons that have serious, serious problems. Now, there are protests being planned all across the United States this weekend to end the wars at home and abroad. And they're being organized all over the place by the United National Anti-War Coalition. And you might want to do a web search and see if there is one of these protests near where you live. And if there is, please get out there with a sign. And please take photos, because it's a guarantee the corporate media will not be covering these protests. We're going to have to cover it here in the independent media. It was quite an eye-opener back when the Iraq War was cranking up, and there were huge anti-war protests that were totally ignored by the network affiliates here on Oahu. And in one case, the crew from a network affiliate newsroom walked right through the anti-war protest in order to cover a pro-war rally being sponsored by Clear Channel, which is now called iHeartMedia. And Clear Channel was out there. They were handing out free sodas and free hot dogs and all kinds of free stuff just to get a crowd to show up. And the network affiliate took, oh, see, Americans support their troops. And then they packed up their equipment. They walked, again, right through the middle of our anti-war protest, got into their van and drove off. So if you are attending any of these anti-war protests anywhere in the country this weekend, please send pictures. We will post them. We're going to cover the real story, not the propaganda that like the corporate media does here. Now, as I mentioned to one of our callers earlier, General Wesley Clark is out there saying that people are radicalized, they're not supporting the United States government, and they're disloyal to the United States. Technically, it's their right. But then he goes on to say it's the right of the government and our obligation to segregate them from the normal community for the duration of the conflict. So in the eyes of Wesley Clark, those who question the war agenda are abnormal. They're weird. They're strange. They're crazy. And this was all said on MSNBC, right on TV, that people opposed to war are abnormal. He's out there, my country, right or wrong. Anybody who doesn't shout it is a traitor. I think it was Thomas Jefferson who once said that being a loyal American means you're loyal to the country and its people all the time, and to the government only when it deserves it. And that was never more true than it is today. Now, of course, George Bush was out there saying, you can't claim to love your country and hate your government. Yeah, it's entirely possible. The country is the country. The country is 300 million people. The government is just a batch of 400 or 500 people of dubious qualifications and education, and even dubious elections, who happen to be out there doing what is in their own best financial interest to do that. My personal view is that loyalty to the government stops when the government walks off a cliff into shark-infested waters and then expects you to follow along. No, thank you. We're not going to do that. Good luck with the fish. Israel forces have killed 2 more Palestinians as the Gaza protests are continuing. And apparently, so many people have been wounded by these IDF snipers, it's straining the Gaza hospitals. And they're running out of supplies, they're running out of equipment, they're running out of room. Now, the other day we were talking about these 2 Palestinians who were shot in both legs by the IDF snipers. Remember, it came on out last week that the IDF is deliberately shooting at the joints of Palestinians to permanently cripple them. So these 2 Palestinians, Yusuf Kamaz, 20 years old, and Muhammad al-Ajuri, 17, were seriously injured. And they needed to be taken to a hospital in the occupied West Bank for surgery to save their legs. Israel refused, and their legs had to be amputated. This coming from what Israel claims is the world's most moral army. Now, the argument between Israel and Poland is continuing, and Israel's President Rivlin sent a message to the Polish president saying that, yeah, Poles did help rescue Jews during the Holocaust, but some Poles helped the Nazis. So you should give us lots and lots of money because the Americans have run out. That's what this is all about. Using this myth of the Holocaust to extort money from other countries. I hope Poland stands firm, because this has gone on way too long. Israel has also wringing their hands and gnashing their teeth over polls that show people just don't care anymore about the Holocaust. It's fading into history, as well as it should. It happened before we were all born, and we're not even sure exactly what happened after all the whoppers about Saddam's nuclear weapons and Assad's sarin gas and torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin and so forth and so on. Prudence demands we question everything we've ever been taught in the government-controlled schools and the corporate media, and certainly coming from Israel. We don't actually know. Remember when the plaque at Auschwitz was changed to basically reduce the total number of people who died there by 2.5 million. And the plaque honors everybody who died, regardless of whether they were Jewish or not, because there weren't just Jews in those slave labor camps. There were Poles, there were Gypsies, gays, mentally retarded people. They were all being used for slave labor, which is wrong, both in Nazi Germany and America's prison industrial complex. But that 6 million number has never been changed. And the Zionists were using that 6 million number even during World War I. It's not a factual number. It's totemic. It's religious. It comes from Jewish scripture here. Now, this was a bit of a surprise, and I have to wonder what the heck is going on here, because apparently President Donald Trump has pardoned Scooter Libby. Now, Scooter Libby was a former aide to Dick Cheney, who was neck deep in the outing of Valerie Plame and the exposure that she was a CIA operative. And the collateral damage was the company that she was working for, Brewster Jennings and Associates, was outed as a CIA front, and they had to shut down. And what their real job was tracking nuclear weapons around the world. Huge amount of damage. Now, Scooter Libby was convicted of perjury. He lied to the investigators, and for some reason, Trump has now pardoned him, saying that Scooter Libby was treated unfairly. So somebody yanked his leash on that one. I think Trump is going to take a huge political hit for that. Obviously, the Bushes are going to love it. Scooter Libby is going to love it. Dick Cheney's going to love it. Now, former FBI Director James Comey has come on out with a new book. Seems like everybody who gets kicked out of the government comes out with a book. Donna Brazile had her book, which I actually wasted money on, and there was nothing really significant in it. But apparently Chris Wallace came on out talking about the book, saying that James Comey is just being bitchy. And there are no bombshells. We're going to save you a little bit of money here. Don't bother buying the book. Send the money into RBN. However, there was one thing in the book that is worthy of note. Comey admits that Hillary Clinton's favorable polling numbers influenced his decision on the email probe. In other words, he let her off the hook for felony Title 18 violations because the polls said she was winning. And I guess he must feel a right fool right now because those polls were so obviously wrong. But he actually admitted that. Now, Comey, of course, goes on the attack against Donald Trump in the book. Trump has fired back, calling Comey an untruthful slime ball. That's not very presidential. I agree with Donald Trump, but he needs to think about bringing a little more dignity to the Oval Office. We need to see that here a little bit. Now, the Department of Justice has finally capitulated under threats of legal action. The Department of Justice has now given the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence the 2-page document showing the FBI's basis for opening the Russia counterintelligence investigation during the 2016 presidential campaign. Remember, Mueller has spent a huge amount of money and a lot of resources, and he's found absolutely nothing to indicate there was any kind of cooperation or collusion between Trump and the government of Russia. So I'm hoping some of the people at the Department of Justice are going to be given the pink slip here. Rand Paul is out there saying that the real danger to our country right now is there are individuals in national security positions, intelligence officials, who are acting on their own, without authorization, without oversight, without any checks and balances from elected representatives. They've gone rogue. They're just doing what they feel is best for the country to do. There needs to be a clampdown on these people. These intelligence officials are supposed to be subordinate to the executive branch. They never have been. When the CIA was first being formed, Harry Truman came on out and said, there's a potential for tremendous danger here. Spy agencies have a tendency to break free from the control of their overseeing government, and that certainly has happened here. Now, here's an interesting lawsuit. This is over in Indiana, and it's expected to go all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. And it is a lawsuit challenging civil asset forfeiture on the grounds that it violates the Eighth Amendment prohibition against excessive fines being imposed. The Eighth Amendment says excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. Now, civil forfeiture is completely out of control. The police are plundering and looting totally innocent people. They're taking property away from American citizens. No criminal charges have been filed. And yet they're just helping themselves to the money. And then they'll come on back and say, well, we'll give you half of it back if you'll sign this agreement that you won't sue us. Well, apparently somebody in Indiana wasn't going to go for that. And they filed a lawsuit saying that civil forfeiture violates the Eighth Amendment. It's going to go to the Supreme Court. I wish I had high hopes the Supreme Court would follow the Constitution, but lately they seem to be just rubber stamping the deep state. Getting into the economic news, PayPal is now rolling out their own debit cards, their own checking accounts, and other services for the unbanked. In other words, if you are a person that a regular bank refuses to do business with, and there are a lot of people out there, that's why you see all these check cashing stores, PayPal is now seeing them as a potential customer base. And actually, I use PayPal, and not too long ago, they sent me a card to go to ATMs and everything, and I promptly cut it up and threw it away because, well, I just didn't want to have that there. Interesting article out of shtfplan.com saying that World War III might actually turn out to be an economic war, which I like that idea. Let the bankers feel the pain for a change. But they're saying instead of guns and tanks and artillery and nuclear weapons, that it will be a global economic war that could crash the entire global financial system. And you and I and ordinary people will be somewhat inconvenienced by it, but just imagine the look on the faces of those money junkies when they lose billions and billions of dollars. Oh, they will cry. They'll leap off the top of their mansions because nothing hurts a money junkie more than being made into a poor person. Even, they'd rather be dead than poor. That is a symptom of money junkieism here. Now, Russia, in response to more sanctions being hit against them, is talking about halting titanium exports. Russia's got a lot of titanium, huge amounts of it. And if they're going to halt titanium exports, it's going to have a serious impact on America's aviation industry. And apparently Boeing stock has already taken a hit over concerns that they may not be able to build their modern aircraft without the titanium. So this tariff war, this sanction war, it's just causing a lot of harm and a lot of damage. We're going to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking about the economic news. Now, last week, in an attempt to calm the stock markets, Trump's chief economic advisor, Larry Kudlow, said the U.S. and China would probably strike an agreement to stop tariffs from being imposed, although he admitted the talks hadn't started just yet. And apparently there has been zero progress since then. China is saying the speech by Xi Jinping was not a concession to Trump, and he's denying that any trade talks have taken place. So it looks like that trade war is still on, and that may be the reason why the stock market did not have its traditional happy ending this Friday. The Dow ended a little more than 100 down. I mean, not a reason to jump off the top of the banking building, but still, you've seen the pattern before. They always like to have the market end up on a Friday so the money junkies have a nice relaxing weekend before they come back on Monday and go back to being money junkies. Total global debt right now is $237 trillion with a T as of the end of last year. And that is the curse of private central banking around the world. The debt cannot be paid off because the debt will always exceed the available money supply. Now, yesterday we were reporting on Hungary's Viktor Orban was out there talking about maintaining the sovereignty of Hungary, of closing the borders to the refugees, of resisting the United States of Europe, and the European Parliament Civil Liberties, Justice and Home Affairs Committee is already on the warpath. They're asking members of the European Parliament to vote for Hungary to be sanctioned over alleged violations of the rule of law, their law, for open borders and integration. We could actually see a civil war within the European Union. That would really muck up plans for war with Russia. Apparently over in Germany, a refugee from Niger apparently slaughtered his German ex-wife and his one-year-old daughter with a knife on the platform of the subway station. It was caught on video. It's really horrible to see. So how's that open borders thing working on out for you? What they should have done before they opened the borders is look at what life is like in these countries the refugees are coming from, because it is very violent. And they should have understood, or maybe they just didn't care. When you bring these people in to Europe and the United States, they're bringing their cultural values with them. And that's the reason that we're seeing so much crime and so much violence and so much murder and so much rapes all over Europe. Now, apparently, Antifa attacked an elderly man in his vehicle at an MSU event. And apparently, Antifa mistook him for a Richard Spencer supporter, and they basically beat up his car with a large piece of wood. And they hit it so hard, the stick broke. Nice people, those Antifa. All right, we're going to take a break for station identification. When we come on back, the lovely Lady Claire will be joining us for hour number 3. Stay tuned. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are still closed. And for those of you watching on YouTube, this gorgeous creature sitting next to me is the lovely Lady Claire, who comes in hour number 3 every Friday with her unique perspective on the world. So, Claire, take it away.
Just when you think things can injunction to stop the FBI from examining materials seized during the raid of his home and office. And Cohen's lawyer is now calling for a delay, and she's saying she didn't have enough time to prepare for the meeting. And
well, I don't know how much preparation she needed. This is clearly a violation of attorney-client privilege.
Yeah, completely. And it is, but the problem here goes a little further than that. And I'm having a Jean-Luc Picard double facepalm at velocity with this. Last night, Business Insider reported that Michael Cohen's predilection for keeping digital recordings of his conversations with associates could become a major problem for him and a major boon for investigators should the FBI find anything incriminating on the tapes. This is completely unbelievable. Why would a guy, Mike, as professionally skilled as is Cohen, not understand that something like this could happen if records were ever subpoenaed?
Because of attorney-client privilege.
Yeah.
And that is supposed to be inviolable, but we know that the federal government does ignore it. They were violating attorney-client privilege down in Guantanamo.
Yeah.
And they're probably doing it in all their prosecutions. They don't play by the rules.
Yep.
I would say that Cohen's probably keeping the records of the conversation so that he can go back and make sure that he doesn't make any misstatements based on those conversations.
Yeah.
But he should have encrypted the files.
Yes. It's unbelievable how naive he seems to be about that.
And by the way, Cohen, I know where you can find some really powerful encryption for free. Let's go to whatreallyhappened.com.
Yes, I know,
Okay,
dear.
all right.
Well, apparently, the boy, as I call him, or Butcher of Yemen, a.k.a. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, has been on a buying spree lately for his War Department. And Spain is now going to be delivering 5 warships worth $2.5 billion to Saudi Arabia. And yesterday they signed the agreement, and Madrid is going to be delivering 5 Avante 2200 Corvette patrol vessels. And the warships are going to be built by a firm, Navantia, at its shipyard in San Fernando. And
That's in Spain, not California.
Yes, right. And I have to wonder, what other wars is the boy, a.k.a. Butcher of Yemen, on the warpath for? Iran? Because the corvettes are not huge. They're small, fast, and maneuverable, right?
They are, and
Yeah.
they're mostly for coastal defense because
Yeah.
they don't really have the range to project power.
Uh-huh.
But it would free up other ships that Saudi Arabia has
Yeah.
to go on out and project power.
Yeah. It very much troubles me, and the morality of the people, including this government, who are willing to sign off on selling this man arms when he has proven himself to be a butcher, creating a genocide in Yemen with war crimes. I don't even know where to start. But I guess the money just does it all.
That's what it's really all about.
Yeah.
Kick up a bunch of wars and conflicts and sell weapons to both sides.
Yeah. And we have something else. We had the Zuckerberg testimony this last week.
The Zook.
The Zook, yes. And one of the things he is admitting that he's going to develop is AI to censor content. Now, he is the CEO of one of the biggest tech companies in the world, and he was testifying before Senate committees, et cetera, et cetera. Most people do not understand Facebook's business model or the user agreement they've already consented to while using Facebook. And the spectacle made one fact abundantly clear. Zuckerberg intends to use AI intelligence to manage the censorship of what he calls hate speech, which other people might possibly in certain instances call the truth on his platform.
Or the conservative point of view.
Yeah.
And Facebook's bias against the conservative point of view is well documented.
It's legendary, Mike.
And
legendary.
Zuckerberg admitted in the hearings that their decision to alter the algorithms to filter certain posts is very subjective.
Yeah.
In other words, they're censoring who they feel like censoring. And Zuckerberg himself is extremely liberal, so are most of the people working at Facebook. Silicon Valley as a whole is highly liberal. And like most liberals, they think they have a right to basically control what the rest of the world is thinking or doing.
Yeah. And Mike, you were sharing with me yesterday that we're seeing some more malware attempt to get on your site. Break it apart.
We're seeing more DOS attacks. We're seeing more, my email box is flooded with all kinds of malware-infected email.
Yeah.
So the war is definitely and truly on. And for those of you out there who are running your own blogs, you got to really make sure your security is up to date, that your antivirus, that the definitions files are up to date, because the game is on, unfortunately.
Yeah,
we're going to do a quick shout out to our honor affiliates who are just now rejoining our network.
And in the 2 days of testimony, the plan for using algorithmic AI for potential censorship practices was discussed a lot of time under the auspices of containing hate speech, fake news, election interference, discriminatory ads, and terrorist messaging.
Well, the one about fake news is, again, fake news is defined as anybody who challenges the official government story about anything. Remember that politician out in California, the one who authored the mandatory vaccination bills?
Pan is his name.
Yeah. And he's out there pushing a law that would criminalize questioning the safety of vaccines, questioning corporate medicine in general, along with questioning government policy. This is all a clear violation of the First Amendment. And I'm not surprised that Facebook has already lost 10% of their user base. And they may even be needing to lie to their advertisers to keep their revenue stream going. And they have been caught rigging the numbers before, by the way.
And Facebook is 5 to 10 years away from what Zuckerberg would characterize as a robust AI platform. And all 4 of the other big 5 tech conglomerates, Google, Apple, Amazon, and Microsoft, are also developing AI, much of this for the shared purposes of content control. Now, here's Mike and here's me. We're both peace activists. I'm a Christian pacifist activist.
I'm a godless atheist peace activist.
I love you
I'm
anyway,
a pagan
dear.
peace activist.
And I'm very concerned about this because when logic starts to become criminalized and people like Mike and me become criminalized because we are doing the best to tell the truth the way we see it and we're using the best documentation we can.
Don't we just look like criminals?
Yes, yes. I particularly look like a criminal, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
It's the eyebrows give it away.
And the specter of a corporate government propaganda alliance is not a conspiracy theory. It's happening, folks, in fact right now. And I am very, very concerned about this. And so is the Electronic Frontier Foundation. And they outline some examples of overzealous censorship in just the last year.
And by the way, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, they do good work. They've been around for a number of years. And they're basically out there trying to maintain the internet as a free and open source for information for everybody. And we need to go back to peer-to-peer viewing of websites and not let these giant corporate social media companies steer us where they want to go. We got to stop using Google. We got to stop using Facebook. We got to stop using Twitter. There are new up-and-coming social media platforms that still value the Bill of Rights, and they're still uncensored. They're not tracking you. They're not sucking your data. I mean, it's one thing for them to take the data that you voluntarily type into their machine, but this plan, I think it was by Facebook, to go on out and acquire your medical records and link them to your user profile, that was way, way over the line. They claim they have canceled that, but I wouldn't trust them. I wouldn't believe them on that.
I wouldn't believe them as far as I could throw them with my bad shoulder, you know.
Okay.
Going back to the Middle East, and one question I want to ask you, Mike, with all of the mixed messages from this administration, who is actually in control out there?
Well, we're seeing this fight going on between the war hawks, neocons like John Bolton, and apparently the voice of reason is Sekdef Mattis. And I think he's looking at the reality of the Russian weapons in Syria, the fact that China has now come on board backing Russia in Syria. And he's realizing that a strike on Syria, even if the U.S. were ultimately to win it, it would be a Pyrrhic victory. That the cost to the U.S., the loss of ships, would be pretty intense. Now, that being said, Fox News was just running a story about how the Harry S. Truman is now heading into the Mediterranean, and you know, supposed to be a training rotation. But as I told the mother of one of the sailors on board the ship, a training rotation can become active service with a simple command.
In a heartbeat.
And I think as soon as the Truman is on station, that will be the point at which we might see a serious attack into Syria, because they're going to need that carrier and its screening vessels, its cruise missiles, and its aircraft to try and match parity with the Russian forces. And I imagine right now probably Russia is moving even more assets into the region. We know what they already have. We don't know that that's all that they have. And again, I would not be surprised if Russia has deployed some of those KH-35 hypersonic sea-skimming anti-ship missiles to the coast of Syria. And one of those could take out the Harry S. Truman. And right now the U.S. would it would be almost impossible to stop.
Yikes, that's a pretty scary thought. And speaking of Syria, apparently they have launched a conscription campaign amid the threat of U.S. strikes. They're forcing civilians in certain areas to join the military amid reports of possible Western coalition forming against the regime of President Bashar al-Assad. And this was reported yesterday by Zaman al-Wasl. The move is one of several, let's say, precautionary measures taken by the Syrian authorities, which has included mass arrests of the relatives of former army defectors, we are being told, according to activists in pro-regime areas. The Syrian Air Force has relocated its MiG-29 and Su-24 fighters from the Al-Sin and T-4 air bases in the desert to the Russian-operated Hmeimim in eastern Latakia. Russia has also evacuated soldiers and missiles away from the Al-Dumayr air base and redeployed them to Damascus. They must be thinking what you and I have been conjecturing about.
Well, the Russians are putting those assets in Damascus to deter a missile attack.
Yeah.
And it's a very dangerous bluff. We know that Russia is dispersing all of its assets in Syria. They've basically taken all of their ships out of the naval base in Tartus to basically spread them out so that no one missile attack could potentially sink the entire fleet.
Yeah.
And we know that the Russians are flying anti-submarine aircraft all along the coastline. They're probably looking for that USS Georgia.
Right.
And I would imagine that if they have a bead on where it is, that will be one of the first ships attacked if actual hostilities break out.
Mm-hmm. And there's also been another military source stating that advanced air defense systems have been deployed around the capital and near the Republican Palace. 6 defense systems equipped with short to medium range surface-to-air missiles, or SAMs, I think is what they're called, right?
Yes.
Have also been placed in the Meze military airport. Now, I am not getting anything that looks like a clear picture of exactly what the U.S. believes it's going to do over there. And apparently the UK and France are all hot and bothered for a strike. Both governments in both countries are not doing terribly well. Macron is suffering from strikes in the rail industry. Theresa May for her very bad handling of the Brexit. And May just wants to plunge on in there without even consulting Parliament.
Well, that's another warning sign.
Yeah.
What's important to understand is that other member states of the European Union want nothing to do with this.
Oh, yeah.
Germany's not going to take part. Italy's not going to take part.
Right.
The Netherlands has already said they will not take part in it. And so basically, this undermines the possibility that NATO would be called on to come on in and join the United States. Now, Article 5 is very specific that a NATO member country has to be attacked, and that compels all the other NATO members to come to their defense.
To support it.
But Article 5 does not come into effect when a NATO member is the aggressor, which is very clearly what's going on here.
Well, and America's had this incredibly long history of trying to determine who is ruling Syria. And this is an independent journalist, Caitlin Johnstone, who wrote the article. Dear, did you know that the CIA organized its very coup in Syria in 1949?
Its very first coup in Syria in 1949.
Wow.
Yes, to overthrow a democratically elected president and install a military dictator. Gee, where have we heard that before? Maybe Iran in 1953, Chile in 1973.
Right, right. And there was another Truth Out article from 2015 about an examination of the ways Syria and its relationship with Iran could be undermined, which is another leitmotif of American foreign policy. And what it appears that the U.S. government is trying to do now is provoke an overreaction from Assad against the various oppositional factions in Syria using psyops to foment paranoia about coup plots. And this is something that the U.S. has been trying to do with the jihadists since 2011. It still isn't working.
Yes.
And then we have this incredible statement made by General Wesley Clark about what the plans have been all along. And it was the plan to go ahead with Iraq, the invasion of Iraq. And he was talking to someone, and he said, why? And the guy he was talking to said, I don't know. I guess they don't know what else to do. And so, well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda? He said, no. There's nothing new that way. They just made the decision to go to war with Iraq.
Well, we know the real reason they went to war in Iraq. As soon as Iraq got permission from the United Nations to sell their oil for the euro.
In euros, yeah.
Tony Blair flew to Texas and had a meeting with George Bush. And the decision to invade Iraq and put their oil back on the market for the U.S. dollar was made then.
Right.
And a year later, they went on in. They smashed up the place. Iraq's oil is back on the world market only for the U.S. dollar. They lynched Saddam Hussein, and it was sold to the American people all on this claim that Saddam had nuclear weapons. He had mobile biological weapons labs. He had a Death Star, all of which turned out to be a lie.
And the rest of this Clark memo was where he said, there is a document that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran. Well, they're not there yet.
No, they aren't.
No.
This was all supposed to be over in, 5 years. And here we are 18 years into it.
Yeah, yeah. You know, an 18-year-old kid doesn't know what it's like to live in this country when there's not a time of war.
Yeah, that's a real shame. Kids in high school have never lived during a time of peace. But, you know, if you go back and you look at the U.S. warmongering, and earlier in the show we were pointing out how the United States government has started 81% of all the wars fought since the end of World War II.
Yeah.
It's hard to actually find any time in our recent history where the United States has not been at war someplace against somebody to cap it. We got to take a break here for commercials, and we'll be right back after these few words. Before we go back to Claire, we're going to go ahead and take a phone call. Rick in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Michael, good afternoon. Thank you to you and Claire, of course, first and foremost, for all you do in getting out the truth. Couple of topics. I want to get to Syria. I think it's important that people realize that there's not just fake news. There's also the type of fake news where they don't report news.
Yes.
You know, and you guys bring that to the table every day, and that's a crime which some people refer to similar to white lies. To me, that's worse. And there's so much, if you put on what's called news nowadays, it's not even news. What you guys do is news. Your website is news.
Thank
okay?
you.
And with that said, I'm going with regards to Syria. And, you know, we've been screaming about this since 2012, and it's about the pipelines. And as you and Claire just said, it's no different than Iran, 53, and then the Shah, and then Libya. We can't forget what they did there. All came down to, and it all came down to where they were going to have their own currency backed by gold. With regards to Iraq and Libya, it was the dinar, which was going to be backed by the gold. And we can't have that because all transactions go through the city of London, and they have to be through the dollar. And this is what's going on with Russia, with its oil, and it's trading under BRICS and things of that nature. And, you know, this is why we're where we're at. But my point is very simple. I don't support the UN. I think it makes war, not peace. But you know what? I'm tired of wagging the tail. I'm tired of all the fake news. I'm tired of the games. Let's get to the point. I'd like to see President Putin, President Trump stand before us in a press conference in the United Nations and Putin admit that the only collusion was with Clinton and Obama administration and Bush administration and Uranium One. There was no collusion with the candidate, President Trump. Put that to rest. And then address the Syria, and the game is over. No more fake news, no more manipulation. It's all over. Make it simple. Keep it simple. Fly to New York tomorrow. Would you not agree?
It sounds like a really good idea. The question is whether the corporate media would cover that or not. I mean, every time the UN has its annual meeting, they'll cover Netanyahu's speech. They won't cover the speech by the Iranian representation. They're filtering what comes out of the United Nations as much as anything else. And the fact that Trump is on that stage wouldn't really matter. Right now...
You guys would report it, though.
Yeah, we'd report it. We have been reporting all this stuff. We've been reporting on Uranium One. Yeah. We're reporting on the email server. It's possible linked to espionage inside the State Department. And we're getting the word out there. And I think we're one of the reasons why the American people have become skeptical of whatever's being said by the government and the corporate media. And that's a healthy thing.
Well, like I said, Michael, I can't thank you guys enough because I'm a 9/11 survivor responder.
Oh, really? Bless you.
That is correct, Rick DeSantis. And you can verify yourself. And I'm tired of this stuff. All the sacrifices we make, there's still thousands of us still dying from the cancers and diseases, our bones destroyed, and osteoporosis, and immune system deficiencies, and you name it, this generation. I'm tired of it. And you know what? If they don't cover it, you guys will. InfoWars will, all the alternative, all the independent news, and that's enough, because like you just said, the Netherlands is pulling out, Italy's pulling out, they're not going to get involved with this because the pressure is building. If these guys went to the UN, it would be the strongest message that had ever happened, and it would change history. Because I personally, at this point, with what I know about history, and it's sad that our population's been so dumbed down. One of the reasons why we were successful in the Revolutionary War is because 98% of the population in the 13 colonies could read.
Yes.
Yes.
We don't have that. Look at Detroit, 95% graduate rate from high school, 95% can't read or write. I guess they're achieving what they set out to do. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, they definitely are. We've been talking about the dumbing down of America for a very, very long time. Common Core was deliberately teaching methods of arithmetic that are very cumbersome and obfuscated. They don't want people able to think and figure things out. They just want people to believe what they're told to believe obediently in order to basically create a population that will go to war because they can't see a reason not to.
And they need a job because there's no economy to provide opportunity or jobs. And, you know, it's like George Carlin said, take away their critical and cognitive thinking abilities, and you've achieved what Hitler said all along.
Yeah. Anyway, listen, we're going to have to let you go. We've got to take another...
Thank you for everything.
Well, thank you for being a first responder on 9/11. And we have to take another break for commercials here. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to take one more phone call, then we're going to close the lines here. Tony in Puerto Rico, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, aloha, Mike. Yeah, I like that song. Yeah, listen, Mike, I want to make a couple of comments. Like that lady who called yesterday, you know, Donald Trump, damn maybe do, damn maybe don't. I think it has his hands tied, and I don't know what's going to happen with him in the end of all this. And my other question is, you spoke about the American causing wars throughout the world. The War of 1812, wasn't that caused because the Americans wanted Canada?
No, the War of 1812 was triggered by the Rothschilds in Great Britain because Congress refused to renew the charter for the first Bank of the United States. And they went to the British government and they offered to fund the war at close to zero interest. And Britain wanted to bring the United States back to colonial status. And it was a very ugly war. And even though the United States won it, they were so much in debt from it, they were forced to accept a charter for the second Bank of the United States, which was the one shut down by Andrew Jackson.
Okay, thank you, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to go ahead and close the phone lines. And Claire, what do you have next?
Well, apparently the Russian and Turkish presidents, Vlad Putin and Tayyip Erdogan, have discussed the situation in Syria over the phone. And they were talking to each other, and this was what the press information came out as, and pointed to the importance of ensuring the necessary conditions for the work of the inspectors for the Organization for the prohibition of chemical weapons, OPCW, in that country. And both presidents were saying that they were very concerned about the aggravation, that's how they described it, of the situation in and around Syria, amid allegations about the use of chemical weapons in the city of Douma. And they stressed the importance of making sure that the OPCW people have a good opportunity to look around. And Mike,
Syria is basically give them a safe travel corridor.
Yeah.
They have guaranteed their security.
Yeah.
And the OPCW, and for that matter, journalists, are basically being allowed to go anywhere they want in Douma and take pictures and samples anywhere they want. They can interview anybody they want.
Yeah.
There's no restrictions placed on them at all by the government of Syria. Does this sound like the actions of somebody who's guilty of what they're accused of?
Oh, heck no. But this is the last bloody thing the U.S., Britain, Israel, and France want to see happen. But at the moment, I see no way of stopping it short of another, even more horrific false flag.
Or they
somewhere.
could just launch the attack and make sure that Douma is the target of a couple of cruise missiles and say, oh, those dastardly Syrians, they hacked our cruise missiles to take out the inspectors, or some such stupid thing as that.
Yeah.
But, you know, the White House has already come out with a statement saying it doesn't matter what the OPCW finds or doesn't find, it will have no bearing on the decision to strike Syria.
So the truth and logic has no bearing on U.S. foreign policy.
No, they want... They want to win in Syria. They don't dare lose, or the wheels will come off the war wagon. And you've got Bolton saying, do it, do it, do it. And thank goodness the Secretary of Defense is saying we need to be very, very cautious because he's in a position to understand the real military readiness of the United States versus the Russian forces. And I think what they're going to do is they're waiting for the Harry S. Truman to get on station, at which point the U.S. will have considerable firepower to basically blitzkrieg Syria. But at some point, if they do that, with Russia moving assets into Damascus to head off a decapitation strike, the U.S. could just go ahead and attack Damascus and say, well, it's your fault for putting those people in there. And we're edging so close to a direct conflict between the U.S. and Russia. And Russia is going to make the U.S. pay a very heavy price, regardless of the outcome.
Well, Russia's top officials are saying their big priority is to find a way to prevent a direct U.S.-Russian war breaking out over a possible U.S. strike. And Mike, this is a real concern. And I think they are very legitimately concerned about this.
Well, Russia does not want a war.
No.
China doesn't want a war. None of these countries want a war.
Yeah.
The U.S. wants the war.
Not the U.S. people.
No, the U.S. government wants war. And again, go back to that statistic. Since the end of World War II, the U.S. government has started 81% of the world's armed conflicts.
That's depressing.
That's what the U.S. government is in the business of doing.
Yeah.
Look how much money they spend on the Defense Department. Much of it wasted, I might add.
Yeah.
But that's what the U.S. government see themselves as a war machine.
Yeah. I'd like to go over to Israel and the Palestinians, and I don't know if Prime Minister Netanyahu is losing it, but he made a statement in public to the Israeli press that Israeli snipers are doing holy work when they're taking out the Palestinians.
Well, what he means is they're shooting the Palestinians full of holes.
Yeah. Yes.
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 More, yes, I hear you, but no. I'm aghast that he actually made that statement in public with live mics running.
Well, what else are they going to say? Yeah, we're committing war crimes down there, that snipers shooting unarmed Palestinians from 100 meters away isn't really a clash, that the IDF weren't being threatened by the protesters. And basically what Israel wants to do is to simply send an object lesson that there will be no more of these commemorations of Land Day. And as I said, I think this is Israel's version of the Amritsar massacre in India, which historians now recognize as the point at which British control over India began to decline.
Begin to fail.
Yep.
I hope you're right on this, because unless there is some high ground moral negotiation, the situation is never going to get resolved, Mike.
Israel doesn't want to negotiate. Israel doesn't want a two-state solution.
Mm-hmm.
Israel wants the Palestinians gone. They want it all.
Yeah.
They want to take back the Gaza Strip. They want the West Bank. They want Eretz Israel from the Nile to the Euphrates.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't care how much American money and American lives it costs.
Yeah. And if you've ever taken a look at the map of purported Eretz Israel, you will see how many bits and pieces of other adjacent countries are going to have to come off of those adjacent countries to create it.
Eretz Israel is in the Bible. God wants us to have this land. I mean, you're not going to go against the word of God, are you?
I don't know. Any translation to me of God wills it when it comes to hurting people? No.
Yes.
I am not there at all. And here was an analysis in globalreach.ca. It's a Canadian blog. Very interesting. And Global Research. I'm sorry, I misspoke. And it's by Paul Craig Roberts, who I have a great deal of respect for. He is a peace activist, but from a little more centrist, conservative side of the forest. And I find myself agreeing with him rather than disagreeing with him. But the title of this article is Criminally Insane U.S. Government, 10 Days Before the End of the World, Analysis of Possible Outcomes. And he talks about the military forces.
10 days, huh? I told you we shouldn't have ordered that carpet.
Darn, I hate it when that happens. Now, there are no protests from European governments.
Yeah, actually there are.
Oh, okay.
There are. We're hearing it from the government of the Netherlands. We're hearing it from Germany and Italy, and a lot of these other European governments saying this really, they don't want to be involved.
Yeah.
Now, Germany is saying they'll provide logistic support to any U.S. action in Syria, but they stop short of saying they will actually go in with any military action.
With troops, yeah.
And at this point, you need to understand the United States government does not really have any friends around the world. They simply have those other nations unable to refuse U.S. demands.
They have acquisitions.
Yeah. Great Britain and France, first and foremost.
Yeah. And apparently Congress has not reminded Trump that he has been given no authority by Congress to launch a military attack on a sovereign country likely to ignite a war and possibly World War III. And the outcome I think Paul Craig Roberts is hoping for is that the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff conclude and honestly share with President Trump that Russia's attack response from an American attack, the entire flotilla could be lost, carrier included, inflicting a humiliating defeat on U.S. arms, and that, in view of the possibility, the Joint Chiefs recommend against the attack. I hope that is what Mattis and the people around him are doing.
I think that's what Mattis is looking at, because right now they've built up this war momentum, and they're basically riding on this illusion of the invincibility of the American military. But it may be a hollow shell. After 18 years of war, the stockpiles are drawn down. The military may, in fact, for all the money poured all over them, they may be a paper tiger. And the first major defeat is going to be the end of the war agenda. My concern, of course, is if the U.S. does go ahead with an attack on Syria, it imperils Russian assets and Russian personnel. Russia strikes back and sinks an Aegis ship or maybe the Harry S. Truman. At that point, the hotheads in our government are going to start turning the little brass keys in those missile silos.
And then we have another article also from Global Research, Wag the Dog, the next expedient target for the U.S. war machine. And we can honestly say that President Trump does have some challenges going into his second year of his presidency. And so many times, presidents have used some sort of a distraction or a misdirection as a way of kind of getting themselves out of trouble when there are personal problems with their presidency.
In the past, some leaders have actually started a war just to get the loyalty of the American people. Yes, the president may be a jerk, but we're at war now, and we've got to support the president. We've got to support the troops. That, I think, has worn rather thin, because the American people are tired of war. We've been at war in all these different countries for no good reason at all, for 18 years, longer than World War I and World War II put together.
Yes.
Tulsi Gabbard is out there saying, where's the benefit to the American people?
There is none.
There is none. It's
Yeah.
all corporate interests,
Yeah.
and everybody
Yeah.
understands
Yeah.
that. And what's really very angering and frustrating to me is that there are apparently people like John Bolton who are willing to risk the incineration of the surface of planet Earth in this argument over whose brand of ink and paper we use for currency for the next 100 years. Because that's ultimately what it's really all about. America doesn't manufacture anything that anybody wants to buy, including now our weapons.
Yeah.
Nobody wants our GMO agriculture. Forcing the world to use U.S. dollars is the only thing holding the economy together.
Yeah.
And more countries are de-dollarizing.
Yeah.
And it's only a matter of time before the whole system starts to come apart. And what the U.S. is trying to do is conquer these other nations and bring them back under dollar hegemony. They did it in Iraq. They did it in Libya. They're trying to do it in Yemen. And they're trying to do it in Syria.
Yeah.
And ultimately, they're going to try and do it in Iran.
Yeah. And I think probably the very maddening thing for me is that Trump came into office promising that he would end U.S. involvement in expensive and needless foreign wars.
So did Obama.
Yeah.
Every candidate running for office understands the American people are tired of the wars, and they're all out there campaigning saying, we're going to stop this nonsense. Except for Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
She campaigned on, we're going to go in and we're going to win.
And the U.S. is still fighting a lost cause in Syria for the sake of it, and is moving ever closer to conflict with perhaps North Korea. And these are proxy conflicts with Russia, like the Spanish Civil War was a proxy conflict with Nazi Germany. But the fact that the U.S. is still happy to enter into them when its president said it would not shows that any little country is still being seen as fair game as long as the U.S. can pursue whatever it's defining as its national interest.
Corporate profit.
Yeah, yeah. And the banks make money hand over fist on wars. And, it's just insane.
War is the banker's richest harvest of debt.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of that movie, The International.
Oh, yeah.
When the investigators are talking to this head of a very large bank about this other bank is buying up small arms manufacturers. And they're saying, is the bank trying to control the conflict? And the banker says, no. They don't care about the conflict. They don't care who wins or loses. They want to control the debt the conflict produces, because that's the real value of a conflict, is it plunges everybody into debt to the bankers.
And there's a follow-on article to the one that I just mentioned, again from Global Research. The American people are starting to be outraged that Trump, Macron, and May are even thinking about a military invasion of Syria in order to punish al-Assad for a chemical attack that he probably had absolutely no business with.
May not have even happened at all.
Yeah. And for example, Breitbart, I link to them occasionally, news site, was associated with Trump's campaign since the very start of his presidency, and its articles typically receive thousands or tens of thousands of reader comments. And one of its lead stories on the 11th of this month was May readies UK for Syria strikes, defies strong public opposition. And this war is frowned upon by a 2-to-1 majority in the UK, And there was a letter that was written to Prime Minister May by a sister Britain. I have just rung up my MP's office to express my opposition and outrage at what will certainly be a war crime should Britain go ahead with bombing the Syrians and killing more innocent people. It is a criminal and an unjustifiable act, using a completely bogus sham as an excuse. I hope everyone will do the same, alternatively email and urgently. My MP, incidentally, is a Tory. So, an overwhelmingly U.S. readership is most strongly liking an anti-Trump anti-May comment.
Well, we ran a poll on our website yesterday, and we got 98% opposed to any further U.S. military action inside Syria.
Right.
And so there it is. All right, we got to take a break for commercials. Back with the last segment of our Pauhana Friday program after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program on this Pauhana Friday. And Claire, I see you've got a very interesting story up on your talking points.
Yes, I do. Today, Jimmy Carter just issued a very chilling warning to President Trump about Syria. He has added his voice to those urging President Donald Trump to refrain from launching an illegal military attack on Syria, warning of the serious dangers, including a potential nuclear conflagration that could result. And what he told the AP is the following: I pray that he, meaning President Trump, would keep our country at peace and not exaggerate or exacerbate the challenges that come up with North Korea, in Russia, or in Syria. I hope he realizes very profoundly, as I did, and how other presidents have done, that any nuclear exchange could involve catastrophe for all human life on this planet. And he's very right.
Absolutely true. Yes, it's absolutely true.
Yeah, and Mike, during the break, you were talking about the Harry S. Truman and potentially when it could get off the Syrian coast and how big a factor this is.
Well, it depends on how fast they're going. And, of course, any carrier battle group is only as fast as the slowest escort.
Right.
But in theory, they could leave some of the slower escorts behind and accelerate their passage across the Atlantic and just say the escorts will catch up with us when we're on station. And so we could see the Truman off the coast of Syria Tuesday, Wednesday of next week. And at that point, if there's going to be an attack on Syria, it's going to happen after that. I think Mattis basically pulled back from thinking they could carry out a successful attack against Syria with the assets on hand, even though the assets on hand are formidable, especially that USS Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
But with the carrier there and its escorts, many of which are also carrying cruise missiles, and the carrier's air wing, it would be a major military force. But the problem is you can't throw that much hardware into Syria and not wind up interacting with the Russian military.
There's no way.
There's no way, especially with Russian personnel and assets deployed around Damascus.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that point, Russia has already said, if the U.S. goes into Syria and attacks Russian assets, Russia will be forced to respond. And they're already out there talking about sinking ships. And if they do have the KH-35 along the coastline, they could, in theory, take out the Aegis ships. They could take out the Harry S. Truman. And that would be a major, major defeat. It would be the end of the illusion of America's military invincibility. And as I said before, in all probability, Russia's sub-hunters are looking for the USS Georgia, and that will probably be one of the first things they try and shoot because of the large number of cruise missiles it is carrying. And we're not out of the woods on this yet.
Yeah.
Yes, Trump appeared to back down, but what Mattis may have told him is we can't have a successful engagement with Russia and China with the assets we currently have there.
Mm-hmm.
So they may just be talking about waiting for the Truman to get on station. All right, there's the music. Time for us to get on out of here. Stay tuned for the John Stedmiller program. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Please share what you learn here with everybody that you know. Talk to them, email them. Don't bother with social media. They're filtering everything right now that is opposed to the war agenda.
Right.
So we'll be back on Monday. Aloha, America.